So the first section, I picked this topic and I called it gaslighting. When the mainstream media tells us we're going crazy. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term gaslighting, it's actually earns its name from a movie that was made in the 1940s, a film noir, and it's basically the short story is that after a murder, a husband continuously lies to his perfectly sane wife, telling her she's going crazy and that particular events never happened when she sees incriminating evidence. He dims the gaslighting in their house every time he is about to go to the attic, and when she notices, he just tells her, "Oh, that's just your imagination." So the term gaslighting basically it came from this film, and the general definition of it is that you repeatedly tell your subject or whoever it is, your target, that events that actually occurred did not occur. So in a way, we see that on a regular basis from our government without any actual proof most of the time, but we do have the government denying all kinds of things that we're pretty sure happened. So I feel like one of the ways that this gaslighting is being used is actually with the mainstream media, and I basically call it the insidious spreading of lies and disinformation with breaking news, and it's used in such a way so as to sway public opinion and on urgent matters. For example, well, case in point, the London massacre. So that just happened this last week that we spoke about earlier in the episode. We have a gentleman who is of Middle Eastern descent and who happens to drive a car down one of the main bridges in London, running over several people on the sidewalk and killing, I believe, 3 or 4 of them. Not sure the exact number there. And what happens is the mainstream media immediately jumps on and tells us this is not an act of terror. This is not an act of terror, and basically continues to repeat that on the news. We don't have enough information, which is in a way completely accurate. We don't have the story's just breaking, so there's not a lot of information out there. We don't want to jump the gun. But when someone drives a vehicle and kills multiple people quite purposefully, that is an act of terror by definition. So this is this is spreading disinformation. So we're told, and then what happens, we're told this information by the mainstream media that we don't know, it wasn't terrorism, and that story is allowed to sort of percolate and be propagated on all types of platforms, from news platforms such as CNN and other mainstream media down to the social media and on a personal basis. So people are seeing these headlines, not necessarily reading the entire articles and regurgitating the information or just the headline to their friends and saying, "Hey, this happened, but it wasn't terrorism." And by the time that the situation is properly assessed by the mainstream media, they print essentially a back page story saying, "Oh, yeah, it turns out that, yeah, this was a Muslim extremist. He had pledged allegiance to ISIS and they claimed responsibility for this attack." But by then, the damage, so to speak, has already been done, and people have already sort of made up their minds about this story. And it's very difficult to it's very difficult to sway someone's opinion on a subject once they've already formed it. You can see that sort of in like that famous Will Rogers quote, "You'll never get a second chance to make a first impression." So in this case, the first impression is a news article or either completely false news article or a misleading news article, and that first impression is made with the public, and then it's basically spreads out like a virus from that point. So it's really frustrating to see things like that. Dan, I'd like to, at this point right here, just get your opinion, what you think about that, and what's your take on gaslighting and such.
I mean, gaslighting is a very real thing, and I can't remember who it was. I remember reading about it. She was a psychologist. I want to say from one of the big universities, like maybe not the Ivy League, but one of the bigger universities. And she described it as an act of psychological abuse. And it's a tactic that's often used by sociopaths. And I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to come from the media. Even I mean, the media is oftentimes guilty of it. But I mean, Bill Whittle. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Whittle. He's a conservative commentator, public speaker kind of guy. He's kind of a jerk, but he's kind of funny at times too. But he had a really good video on gaslighting a few years back. If you search on YouTube, if you look up Bill Whittle firewall and you search for gaslighting, it'll come up. And he goes into the way that during the Obama administration, how many times the public were lied to, especially when it came to healthcare. You know, things like if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your healthcare plan, you can keep your healthcare plan. And then months later, once the bill passed and people started getting kicked off of their insurance and they started losing their doctors and they had to start making choices that they didn't want to make, and people started calling him out on it. He said it. The media said it. Nancy Pelosi said it. They all said, "Oh, no. We never said you can keep your doctor if you like your doctor. We said if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor as long as it is still applicable under the Affordable Care Act," and that kind of thing. But even outside of the realm of politics, I mean, I think we've all known people like that who will, who might just lie straight to your face and try and convince you that they didn't do something that that they did. And it's just a matter of time before you start to question, well, am I wrong? Am I making this up in my own mind? Like, is there something wrong with me? So I mean, yeah, gaslighting is a very real and very serious thing. It's just a shame that more people don't know about it, or at least don't know it by name.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with your point about the mainstream media. It does not have to be necessarily something that's used by media, and quite frequently it is a tactic that is used by people who are abusers of sort of helpless victims. In a way, you see that sometimes with child abuse, where the abuser will tell the child that's been abused, hey, of course, there's the well-known, hey, don't tell anybody this happened or I'm going to hurt you. But there's also, hey, this never happened. What are you talking about? And basically, the effect of gaslighting on the target is that what happens is you continually say the same thing. Hey, it never happened. This never happened. And it'll basically make anybody check themselves and like, hey, wait a second. Is this real? Did this event actually happen? It's one of those ways where you see people questioning the Holocaust. For example, you have people out there who happen to be influential who said the Holocaust never happened, and now all of a sudden you have a group of people, not all of a sudden, but as a result of that, you have a group of people who don't believe the Holocaust ever happened. And also with the flat Earth theory, you have people out there saying the Earth is flat, and now you have a group of people who believe that the Earth is flat for real.
Before you continue, for those,
regardless of all the evidence that's out there.
For anyone who does not know, the flat Earth theory is a real legitimate conspiracy theory that people think the Earth is flat, spiraling slowly downward through outer space, and the rainwater that we receive through the sky is actually the water that's fallen off the side of the Earth, but we've just gone down faster than it. It's a weird thing, but it's a real thing. Continue, sorry.
Yeah. So, and we even had Shaquille O'Neal come out, I think it was last week, and say that he completely bought the flat Earth theory. Of course, after the frenzy, the media frenzy that happened because of that, he completely said, "I was just joking, you guys." Unfortunately, April Fool's isn't for another week, so I don't know why he would have said that. I saw the post and he sounded pretty serious. But you have, yeah, and this is sort of jumping off the topic here, but Shaquille O'Neal of all people, flat earther. So yeah, repeat the same narrative over and over again, and your subject, your target, your victim will believe you. Yes. And that's true. I mean, you can see it with kids, the parent to child relationship. Okay, that's why children are so impressionable by their parents or lack of parents. So whoever they have in their lives as a role model or as an influencer, they're going to basically be formed and molded in the shape of that, in the mold of that person, what they are told. So, and adults are no different. We like to think that, you know, once we become an adult, whatever that age is, that we're no longer susceptible to that type of trickery. But the truth is that we are susceptible to that, and it's a very real problem. So, and that's sort of one of the cruxes of our show. That's sort of one of the reasons that I wanted to start this with Dan, was to help people to wake up from sort of the stories, the narratives that are put out there, and to be able to think for themselves clearly, and not to just buy the bag of goods that we've been sold, the bill of goods that we've been sold by the powers that be, whatever that is, whether that's media, government, whatever. That we need to really begin to think for ourselves in a creative way, and assess information, be able to gather and assess information in a way that we can actually discern what's truth and what's not. Because it's my belief that, you know, we live in one of the greatest countries in the world that's ever been, but it may not always be that way. We're fortunate to not live in a country like a North Korea or a China, where there's propaganda left and right, and these poor people are so influenced, they're so in the matrix, if you will, that they don't know, you know, what's real and what's not, because they're so shut out from everything else by their government. So we are blessed to be in this country, this great country, and I'm thankful to be living here, but we still need to keep an open mind with the information that we take in, and not just buy the story, whether it's a narrative that we buy, that we follow, such as if you happen to be more right leaning, or if you happen to be more left leaning politically, don't just trust the voices, the prominent voices, for what they say, and as sort of like being a part of that team, if you will, but really take the information that's out there and make it your own. Think about it creatively, so that something like this, gaslighting, will be much more difficult to happen to you, and hopefully to your friends, as you would open their eyes as well. So,
you know, and the other thing to remember too, you know, you mentioned that this, you know, that we may not always be this way, like, you know, this country may not always be the way that it is. And there are definitely some people out there who would like it to not be the way that it is. I tend to agree with Chris, and I think maybe next time, maybe during the next show or something, we can kind of go into our backgrounds. But I have a very strange, you know, political background than most people would probably guess, who were to know me. Anytime that I tell people the story about, you know, how I've kind of developed in what I believe and what my politics are, and what my political ideology and philosophy are, they're always very surprised. But you know, the thing that came to mind as soon as you mentioned that was the Ronald Reagan quote. You know, freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. I think it's important to remember that. You know, like, we can take for granted easily that you know, we live in a free country where we're able to say what we want, where we're able to have a show like this, where we can question the status quo, where we can question what people are saying in the media, what the politicians are saying, and to be able to do it in an open way on a broadcast medium that carries to the entire world. But you're right, you know, it could very well change. It could have changed under Obama. It could change under Donald Trump. It could change under whoever comes next. You know, we have to always be vigilant in making sure that, you know, we're being careful about that. But also, you know, to the point, you brought up the movie Gaslight from the 40s. Just for anyone who hasn't seen it, I haven't seen it, but I know the story of the movie. The resolution of it in the end is that, you know, a police officer who's walking by notices the gaslight's dimming, and he comes in to make sure everything's okay. And doing so, confirms to the wife that the gaslights are being dimmed and that she's not crazy, and then the whole plan just kind of falls apart. So it's not a hopeless thing. I mean, yeah, it's a terrible thing that people do, but it doesn't. If you go with the story, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to end badly all the time. And there's nothing that you can do, because it only takes one person to get up and start talking and speaking the truth about what's going on.
That's right, Dan. And that's really, again, that's really what we want to do here with our channel. We really want to see all of you benefit from the information that we share. We don't think that we're the most knowledgeable people on any of these subjects. We're not experts. We're not political scientists per se by any stretch of the imagination, but we're just a couple guys who really want to share our perspective on things, because we think that there's people out there who could really benefit from hearing the truth and from just learning more information. There's never a harm in learning information. It's beneficial, and I believe that information or knowledge is power. Just like I always think back to that Reading Rainbow end screen, where it's just the little star with the rainbow going across the screen, and it says, "The more you know." And growing up with that, I was pretty influenced by that, and it is a way on that show to sort of get people to look into, and become more interested in books and information and learning. So I really want to encourage our audience, all of you guys, to really think outside the box, to not be just another sheep being led along, but to really think for yourselves.